The lawyer slid a document across the table and said, "Your client has no legal claim to this property. The deed was transferred. It's over." My hands were shaking, but not from fear. Let me tell you how we got here and why that lawyer had no idea what was coming next. My name is Renee. I'm 37 years old, and for most of my adult life, I was a home health aide. 14 years of early mornings, long drives, and caring for people who couldn't care for themselves. I bathed strangers. I held their hands when they were scared. I even cared for my own mother-in-law in her final months, while simultaneously raising my son, Derek, mostly on my own after my husband passed. I wasn't wealthy. I didn't finish a 4-year degree. I took some classes at community college and then life happened, and I never went back. I bought my house in my late 20s, a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, nothing glamorous, but every single payment came from my hands and my hours. I paid it off slowly, stubbornly, proudly. Derek grew up in that house. I thought he loved it the way I did. I noticed over the years that he seemed a little embarrassed by me, by my work uniform, by my small car, by the simplicity of how we lived. I told myself it was just his age. I told myself he'd grow out of it. I wasn't glamorous. I didn't have a law degree or a big savings account, but I had patience and I had receipts. If you've ever given everything to someone and still been treated like you had nothing, subscribe right now. Drop a comment and tell me your story. You are not alone here. Let's go. Derek was 26 when he showed up at my door with 2 bags and red eyes. He and his girlfriend had broken up. He said he needed a few weeks. I said, "Come in, baby. Take your time." That was my first mistake. Not letting him in, but believing the version of him I wanted to see. The first 2 months were fine. He was quiet, kept to himself, but he helped around the house sometimes and we'd eat dinner together a few times a week. Then something shifted. He started getting phone calls he'd take outside. He stopped joining me for dinner. And then she appeared, a woman I'd never met, with sharp eyes and a habit of walking through my home like she was measuring it. One evening, she stood in my living room and said, "So this place is fully paid off? No mortgage at all?" I said, "Yes." She smiled in a way that made the back of my neck feel cold. I brushed it off. I shouldn't have. About a month later, I walked past my home office and saw Derek standing at my filing cabinet with his phone out, photographing documents. I stopped in the doorway. "What are you doing?" He didn't flinch. He just looked up and said, "Helping you organize, Mom. You have too much paper clutter." He said it so calmly, so naturally, and I almost believed him. Almost. One Tuesday morning, a certified letter arrived from the county courthouse. I stood at my kitchen counter and opened it slowly, the way you open something you already know is going to be bad. I was listed as a respondent in a property dispute. The claimant was my son. Derek was arguing that I had verbally promised him the house years ago, and that financial contributions he claimed to have made entitled him to legal ownership. I read it twice, 3 times. My coffee went cold. Then I saw the attachment, a photocopy of a signed letter supposedly written by me, promising Derek the house. My name was at the bottom, my signature, but I had never written a single word of it. I sat at that kitchen table for a long time. The refrigerator hummed, a car passed outside, and the truth settled into my chest like a stone dropping into still water. He had been planning this before he ever knocked on my door. I called my sister that same evening. I needed to hear a familiar voice. I needed someone to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. She picked up and I told her everything. There was a long pause on her end. Then she said, "Renee, Derek mentioned that you'd been a little confused lately. Maybe this is for the best. He'd take good care of the house." I didn't speak for a moment. Confused, that word. My own sister using my son's word against me. I said, "I'm not confused. He forged my signature." She said, "Let's just see how it plays out." I hung up and sat with the silence. It was heavy. A few weeks later, I made the mistake of attending a family cookout. I went because I refused to disappear. I was standing near the food table when Derek started talking loudly to a group of cousins and aunts. "She doesn't even understand what she signed," he said, laughing a little. I'm just trying to protect her assets before she does something worse. People nodded. A couple of them laughed. Nobody looked at me. I set down my plate. I walked to my car. I did not cry. Then came the third blow. Derek's girlfriend started calling my neighbors. She told them I was planning to sell the house to a developer and that the whole block would change. One neighbor, a woman I'd known for 11 years, stopped waving when I pulled into the driveway. Another avoided eye contact at the mailbox. She had poisoned the ground around me. But through it all, I kept going to work. I kept paying my bills on time, and every single night, I wrote everything down in a small notebook I carried everywhere. Every date, every conversation, everything I saw. They wanted to see me fall apart. I decided that wasn't going to be the show I gave them.
What they didn't know was that I had been building a case before they even filed one. The night I caught Derek photographing my documents, I didn't just confront him and walk away. After he went to bed, I called my bank and flagged my accounts for monitoring. I also went back into that home office and set up something small, a voice-activated recorder I'd bought a year earlier for work meetings and never used. I put it on the shelf behind a stack of folders, inconspicuous, forgettable. Over the following weeks, I collected everything I could find. Bank statements going back 5 years that showed Derek had contributed exactly nothing to this household financially. Dated photos of the house in my name. Old voicemails of Derek asking me for money, not offering it. And then the recorder started working. Every lie has a paper trail if you know where to look. But there was something else, something I hadn't fully uncovered yet, something connected to the original deed of the house, something my late husband had put in place long before any of this began. I didn't know the full shape of it yet, but I had a feeling that when the time came, it would matter. I let them think they were winning. People make their worst mistakes when they think the game is already over. I hadn't spoken to Mr. Aldridge in almost 8 years. He was the attorney who handled my husband's estate when he passed, a semi-retired man with a quiet office that smelled like old books and weathered wood, the kind of office where serious things got done without any noise. I called him on a Thursday afternoon and told him what was happening. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Bring me the document." I drove to his office the next morning with the court papers in a folder. He put on his reading glasses and studied the attached letter for a long time. Then he set it down and looked at me over the rims of his glasses. "The notary stamp on this letter is registered to a county you've never lived in," he said. "And the date on this document predates the version of the deed form your county began using. This is a forgery, and not a careful one." I felt something loosen in my chest. Then he said, "There's something else." He stood and went to a filing cabinet in the corner. He pulled out a folder I didn't recognize. Inside was a handwritten amendment to the original property deed, added by my husband before he died, stored in Mr. Aldridge's firm and never digitized. The language was specific. The home could not be transferred to any heir who was found to have acted in financial bad faith against the primary owner. My husband had thought of things I hadn't. Meanwhile, Derek was growing bolder. He told family members the house was basically already theirs. He and his girlfriend were talking about which walls to knock down. He showed up to a family dinner and described his renovation plans like I wasn't even a real obstacle anymore. Mr. Aldridge called me the evening before the hearing and said, "Let them come to court. That's exactly where we want them." I slept better that night than I had in months. The morning of the hearing, the courtroom smelled like floor wax and recycled air. I sat on my side of the table with Mr. Aldridge beside me, still and quiet. Derek came in with a hired attorney in a sharp suit. His girlfriend sat in the back row with her coat still on, arms crossed, already looking pleased with herself. Derek's attorney went first. He presented the forged letter with confidence, arguing that my diminished understanding of legal documents made me an unreliable narrator of my own intentions. He used that phrase, diminished understanding, and I watched Derek nod slightly as the words landed. Then Mr. Aldridge stood. He spoke without hurry,
without theater. He submitted 3 items into the record. First, a forensic document analysis from a certified examiner showing that the notary stamp was fraudulent and the date on the letter was inconsistent with county records. Second, audio recordings from my home office. The room went very still as the judge listened. On that recording, Derek's girlfriend said clearly, "She'll never know it wasn't her signature. Just make sure the date looks right." Derek said, "She doesn't check anything. It'll be fine." Third, Mr. Aldridge submitted my husband's handwritten deed amendment and read the relevant clause aloud. The room was completely silent. Derek's attorney leaned over and whispered something urgently. Derek had gone pale. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him look. I turned to face my son for the first time all morning. I looked at him steadily and I said, "I gave you a home when you had nowhere to go, and you brought a forged signature into a courthouse with my name on it. I want you to sit with that." He opened his mouth. "Mom, The judge cut him off. The property claim was dismissed with prejudice. The forged document was referred for criminal review. Derek was ordered to vacate my home within 30 days. As I stood to leave, I glanced toward the back row. His girlfriend was already gone. Derek sat alone at the table, hands flat on the wood, staring at nothing. Mr. Aldridge walked me out into the afternoon light. We didn't celebrate. We didn't need to. He shook my hand and said, "Your husband was a careful man." I said, "Yes, he was." Derek didn't call for 3 weeks. When he finally did, I watched my phone buzz on the counter and I let it go to voicemail. I haven't listened to it. My sister called 4 days after the hearing. She apologized. She said she should have believed me. I listened to the whole thing and then I said, "I know," and I left it there. Some fences don't need to be rebuilt. I went home that evening, made a cup of coffee, and sat on my porch. The garden my husband and I planted the spring before he got sick was still growing, overgrown in some spots, but alive. Derek was facing a fraud investigation. His girlfriend had already moved on to whatever came next for her, and I was sitting in front of the house I paid for, on a porch I earned, in a life that was still entirely mine. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't celebrating. I was just quiet in the way you get quiet when something heavy finally lifts. The house was never just about money. It was about whether I mattered. And now I had my answer. I gave it to myself. If someone in your family ever used your love against you, turned your generosity into a weapon, I want to hear it. Subscribe and share your story in the comments. You deserve to be believed. Click hype to help this story reach every parent who needs to hear it. Standing up for yourself is tough, especially when it's your own blood standing against you. If you've been there, subscribe and become part of our community. Let me know this story helped by clicking hype, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel.